How to Increase Engagement in Geography Through Collaborative Work by Elena McCann. My action research took place at Seven Hills North Primary School. Student enrollment was at 294 as reported in their 2018 annual report. I worked in a Year 2 class with 27 students. Academic performance ranged from high to basic, with most of the class in the sound area. 2 students had modified learning plans, one of which included support for EALD. The seating arrangement in the classroom was in rows, 8 seats across. There were 3 rows, and a 4th row having only 4 seats. The classroom had 7 working desktops, which were used daily by a few students for reading programs. Students use computers in the library for 1 hour a week. My mentor teacher has over 30 years of teaching experience and provided useful feedback and suggestions for improving my teaching pedagogy. From my observations, lessons usually followed the same format. Started out with teacher-directed learning, then teacher modeling, followed by activities done as a classroom, and then finally individual work at the students' desks. Most students followed instruction well and were generally interested learners. Students were well behaved and raised a hand to ask questions or answer questions. During my observation time, reading groups was the only time students were set up in small groups, and I didn't observe any lessons that required collaborative work. My initial action research question was how to increase engagement through inquiry-based learning in geography. I planned to use the mini unit in geography that I had created for PPP2 unit as the main activity for my action research. However, I changed the focus of my research question to how to increase engagement in geography through collaborative work. There were a few reasons why I changed my focus question. 1. The students did not have any exposure to inquiry-based learning, so I needed to induct them through the process of my mini unit. 2. I had minimal amount of time to teach geography, and there would be no opportunity for me to add any more time during my practicum. Finally, I felt that students did not have enough experience working collaboratively, and I did not want to ignore the opportunity to work with students to increase this skill, so I decided to change the focus of my research. I feel that working well in groups is a foundation skill that helps improve the quality of students' learning experiences across a wide range of subjects. Having made this my new focus, I collected data to help me evaluate if if my implemented strategies had the desired result, which was to increase student engagement. Collection and use of student data in professional self-reflection. I collected 4 different kinds of data: work samples, student self-assessment, learning conversations, and observations of student learning and engagement. To help me make an insightful evaluation of my teaching practice and of students' learning, I collected data in the form of photos, recordings, written reflections, and feedback. Data were collected over a period of 3 weeks during my second practical teaching experience. I gathered data during geography lessons and from the work samples produced during this lesson time. To evaluate the quality of student engagement, I looked at student participation, achievements, and their engagement with lessons with me and with each other. Once the data was collected and sorted, I analyzed against 2 frameworks. First, I used the M small e big E framework to evaluate student learning experiences, and I used the 3 dimensions: high cognitive, high operative, and high affective. Second, I used the insider classroom framework to evaluate the insider role students take in this insider classroom. Muntz, Lawson, O'Brien, and Johnson described the aim of the classroom learning experience as the balanced interplay of the high cognitive, high affective, and high operative to help create the insider classroom. The analyzed data then informed me on how my teaching practice can help students not only achieve the small e engagement in individual experiences, but to help students reach the big E engagement and develop a consciousness that school is for me, rather than one of defeat, struggle, or of giving up. The impact of this pedagogic change is that I will take the time to develop experiences for my students that are fun, challenging, and give them a voice to help create that insider classroom that all can benefit from. All data collection and analysis of the data followed the ethical guidelines for classroom-based research action. Consent forms were collected from 19 of the 27 students, from the school principal, and my mentor teacher. Key findings: students' work samples. I will now outline my key findings based on data collected and annotated. This work sample shows how students worked in groups to collect data and information about the different environments and features around the school. Students stayed in their respective groups as they discussed and agreed on the images to capture on the iPads. At this point in the learning process, students were still just learning to collaborate and were not yet collaborating to learn. When this work sample was analyzed using the messages system of the Insider Classroom framework, students received the message of knowledge, a reflectively constructed access to contextualized and powerful knowledge. To them, the message they get is, we can see the connection and the meaning. This experience was highly effective, which means that the activity was negotiated between the teachers and the students and so students had a higher level of autonomy than usual. Working outside of the classroom was not only fun for the students because it broke away from the norm, but it also allowed them to actively participate in an experience that would generate material for their own future lessons. They are also achieving a New South Wales geography syllabus inquiry skills by collecting geographical information through visual representation. Another student work sample. This sample was produced by students working collaboratively in groups. The work was achieved after several lessons in which students had to learn to work collaboratively. They progressed well, and they got the message of place. I analyzed that they were making constructive connections with their own real world. Here they are also achieving their geography outcomes and practicing collaborative learning to answer the key inquiry questions as outlined in the New South Wales Geography Syllabus. Key findings. Observations, working in groups. The observation task above details how student engagement is present while students work collaboratively. Their posture and demeanor are all markers of effective and operative engagement. Students enjoyed sitting on the floor with their groups in different parts of the room. This was new to them. It gave the groups a sense of unity, and as each group staked their little area on the floor, a sort of collective sense of ownership over their shared workspace. On the ME small e big E framework, this is classed as a highly operative and highly effective experience. The experience also gave students the message of control as they were sharing the classroom space interdependently, mutually, and from power within. Key findings, observations, mentor-teacher feedback, and reflections. I'm using two forms of observation methods in my action research. Observations from my mentor teacher, a third party, and my observations of the class as they worked independently. I found the feedback I received from my mentor teacher extremely helpful to gauge the level of enjoyment and engagement from students. Being a novice at teaching, I discovered that it was sometimes hard to always be fully aware of all students' engagement level. A second set of eyes was helpful to reflect on parts of the lesson that worked well and those parts that didn't. The feedback I received showed high effective experience for the students. Upon evaluation of my reflections, I see that different dimensions of engagement, the high cognitive, high effective, and high operative, can reach different students differently, and sometimes not at all. This informs my practice because I have mostly measured engagement at a whole class level, but I need to be aware that this will not always be the case. In fact, it may sometimes be the exception. This is related to my pedagogic practice because I may need to find further adjustments to my practice to differentiate so that my activities continually engage all students. Key findings, learning conversations, think, pair, share. Through learning conversations, I was able to evaluate if students were successfully using collaborative skills in situations other than working as a group on the floor in the classroom. I was able to identify changes in their conversations from the I to the we. They were also extending their classroom learning into other areas in their life. I reflect on the powerful tool that inclusive conversations can have on a student's sense of belonging to the insider classroom. I saw a bit of how teacher inclusive conversations can help share the power between teachers and students and keep the focus on learning and not on behavior. I think I could have done more to encourage these types of conversations. Key findings, learning conversations, presenting to class. The learning conversation here was from a student-student interaction. My focus in this slide is to reflect on what the small e engaging message looked like in my students. This part of the learning experience allowed students to showcase what they know, what they learned, and how they achieved it, while at the same time, a back and forth discussion with peers challenged them to learn more. The dimensions seen here was I am capable. Because they worked on it collaboratively, students practiced sharing their voice with their group members. They then transferred this practice to the classroom discussion. Also, they're still working on and achieving syllabus outcomes and developing inquiry skills. Key findings. Students' self-assessment. The REAL REAL framework. I employed some of the REAL framework to evaluate students' self-assessment data. I used Woodford and Munn's dimension of self-assessment unidimensional questions to get data on the effectiveness and effectiveness of their collaborative activities. As seen here, student self-assessment shows that the change in my teaching practice was having the desired result of higher engagement in geography lessons. Students felt that they were making a valued contribution to the project and that collaboration with their group members was working for them. Upon analysis of the data, I feel that I could have done more to collect different dimensions and higher levels of reflection and self-assessment. In future action research cycles, I would modify my practice to include more self-assessment. The benefit would not only be for me, but also for the students, because they would have the opportunity to reflect on their own learning. Short and long-term implications. Working collaboratively on a project helps engage students with their learning. High cognitive, high affective, and high operative experience lead to small e engagement with learning. Both students and teachers benefit from action research. Action research is a skill for future potential professional development. My current practice varies from week to week as I try to find what works best for my students and for me. I'm still trying to find my voice as a teacher. Having said that, my teaching philosophy underpins my practice. I believe that students should have the opportunity to create knowledge through social interactions, and that my role as a teacher is to help them engage with the subject and become critical thinkers. I hope to use action research to refine the skills I need to fulfill my vision and become the teacher I want to be. I have some concerns about my practice. I always will. My concern today was how I can engage students in geography using collaborative grouping. My concern tomorrow will be different, but action research will help me to continually improve my practice. My pedagogic concern will always be how can I help students become more engaged with their own learning at school. I will need to continually reflect on my practice to be aware of how my teaching is helping or not helping student engagement. This affects my professional development because I will always need to work towards improving my practice. How will I do this? I will look at current literature to refine my ideas of how to make changes. I will try things in my classrooms and monitor and document what happens. I will then be able to review and evaluate if the changes that I make have the desired results. Current student engagement pedagogical trends show that project-based learning, ICT in classrooms, and culturally and linguistically respectful pedagogies all have positive impacts on student learning. These are just a few trends that are potential future action research cycles. I am interested in all of these and in exploring and implementing them into my practice. They will keep my teaching practice relevant in our society, to my students' futures, and relevant to their past.